fellow Toastmasters. We all long to love and be loved, and to connect deeply with others in satisfying, nourishing relationships. There's an emerging focus in the field of therapy on something called attachment theory. Attachment theory specifically looks at the early relational field with our primary caregivers and looks at how these dynamics become imprinted and familiar to us. They become patterns that influence how we feel in relationships later in life and also how we see relationships later in life. Hopefully, for most of us, we come from what's called secure attachment. If this is the case, we find that we expect to be treated well, we respect ourselves, we respect others, there's a realistic trust in others, and a basic optimism even in the face of stress. But if the original bonding was painful in some way, the residue of this hurt influences us from behind the scenes in ways that we're often not even aware of. The good news about this is there's healing. Research shows that I think about 40% of the adult population is securely attached. So what about the other 60%? There are 3 attachment styles that fall into the category of insecure or disrupted attachment styles, and I'm going to be talking about those 3. There's a woman, a therapist named Diane Poole Heller, who's done a lot of research into attachment styles, and she's also a somatic therapist, a body-based therapist. And she has spent the last 7 years developing a program called DARE, which is Dynamic Attachment Repatterning Experience. She teaches therapists how to help people heal their early attachment wounding so they can form more loving and secure connections later in life. There's also a man in California named Dan Siegel who's doing a lot of research on the neurobiology of attachment. There's a lot of exciting research now looking at how our brain is actually shaped early on in life through our relationships. And he has written a book called The Developing Mind about this. So to say a little more about secure attachment comes when there's a healthy environment early in life and something called good enough parents, and I put that in quotes. In the therapy world, we talk about good enough parents because no one's perfect. But good enough parents are parents who can be loving and responsive and consistently available to their children. They're safe, not harmful. They're affectionate. And they, most importantly, they know how to repair when there's been some kind of misattunement or argument. So if they notice that they've missed a signal from their child or their child is distressed, they can step in and really provide some repair. And this is actually a huge part of what creates secure attachment, both in adult relationships and childhood relationships, is this ability to do the repair work. So what about the other styles? What if we don't get that really secure, healthy holding environment early on? So there's been 3 different disrupted styles of attachment identified. The first one is avoidant. This style results when parents have been extremely unavailable or hurtful or hostile in some ways towards a child. So you can imagine if you're a little child, you're going to your parent, there's hostility in response, or they're just consistently neglectful or unavailable. What the child learns to do is withdraw and not rely on relationships for support. What you'll often see in adults with this history is a diminished interest in or focus on relationships and more of a focus on work, on hobbies. There's not as much emotional investment in relationships simply because that's been the source of disappointment in the past rather than nourishment. Partners who are with someone with this strategy might feel like their partner is always shutting down, like their partner is unaware of feelings and needs, or their partner is going away from them. The second style I'm going to talk about is called anxious attachment. This style results when parents were authentically loving with their kids at times, but it was somewhat inconsistent. So the child learns, mom's wonderful, dad's wonderful, they love me sometimes, but then sometimes they go away for long periods of time, or there's just a lot of inconsistency. So you can imagine with this style, the child ends up feeling insecure, incapable of really having love on a consistent basis. And there's often an internalized belief that says, I can have love, or I can want love, but I can't have it consistently. So the child, and then later the adult, becomes often obsessively over-focused on their partner when they've had this kind of early attachment style. You might know someone like this or have had some moments of this yourself, but there can be a tendency to be overly focused on the partner, really obsessed with, is he or she going to call? Does he or she love me? Does he or she still care about me? Am I still okay here? People with this style usually have trouble relaxing in relationships and feeling secure. And they can often be really preoccupied with the other and really unaware of what's going on inside and have a lot of difficulty self-soothing and just managing their own anxiety. They tend to look to other people as the sole source of support and a way to get their needs met. There's difficulty with self-soothing. Again, there's that underlying belief, I can want, but I don't get to have this permanently. The third and last style that I'll talk about is something called disorganized attachment. This results when a parent is terrifying or overly chaotic in some way with the child. Sadly, what's often the case in these settings is that there's abuse going on, some kind of abuse, some kind of trauma. So you can imagine that for a child in this situation, what happens is what gets programmed into their nervous system and their belief system is relationships are scary, they're painful, they're harmful, they actually hurt me. And there's no safe holding environment for kids with this kind of background. As a result, they have trouble regulating their nervous system, they have trouble regulating emotions, and there's a lot of disruption around that. So as adults, they may seem unpredictable and chaotic themselves. They may really have trouble with what's called affect regulation or mood regulation. They may be very unpredictable and chaotic in relationships, and often go back and forth in something that Diane Poole Heller calls the approach avoidance pattern, where they approach relationships and then they avoid and pull back really intensely, because there's all of this early imprinting that says relationships aren't safe and I'm actually going to be hurt here. So the good news about all of this is that there is healing that can happen. If the original patterns are not healthy, we do need to learn to recognize them internally, heal the original wounding, and also practice specific exercises to help us learn secure attachment. The good news is we can do this with the help of a therapist, and Diane's work is really becoming widely known. She's training a lot of therapists. There are other methods of training available out there, but there are really specific techniques to use with each attachment style to help people form more secure attachments. Part of what I find fascinating about the psyche is when things get programmed in early, we have a tendency to go out and to repeat the past even if we don't want to. And so for a lot of these attachment styles, for example, the anxious style, someone with that style often has a tendency to go out and match up with a partner who's more avoidant, who actually is sort of unavailable and withdraws from them. And then it continues to repeat the same patterns and instill the same belief that love isn't really available. So the good news is we can learn to give and receive love. We can find the satisfaction and fulfillment that we really desire. This is really, I believe, what we're here for. And there is hope. We can learn to love again, and we can have the kind of relationships that really bring satisfaction and love and nourishment into our lives, because studies really show that we are happier when we're supported in connection with others. Mr. Toastmaster.